Myself, Aditya P. Tripathi, Assistant Professor, Department of Commerce, Shamlal College Evening, University of Delhi. My dear students, the today's topic of my lecture is labor variances. After discussing the material variance, the next point of discussion shall be labor variances, because the labor is the second component of our cost in the three components of out of three components of our cost, that is material, labor and overheads. So we'll talk about how to calculate labor variances. What is labor variance, how to calculate it, and the way the management is going to make use of this particular analysis for taking corrective steps. That will be actually our point of discussion in today's lecture of mine. So let's talk about labor variance. What is labor variance? My dear students, as you know that in factory, after purchasing the material, when the material goes for further processing, that is producing the output, or you can say for making our products, for processing our raw material, what we do, we actually go for deploying labor into this particular process. And once the labor is deployed, there are chances that your labor is not working properly, or the labor output is not as per the standards. So that is the point where we need to calculate the labor variance. The term labor variance itself indicates that there is some variation into the standard labor cost and actual labor cost. So that is the point which is actually on which we are supposed to conduct this kind of analysis, that is called labor variance analysis. So in this, what we do, we first calculate labor variance. If you are comfortable with the material variance computation, it is quite easy for you to replicate the same into the labor variance by adding certain points into your point of analysis. You can easily understand. And in previous lecture of mine, I told you how to calculate the material variances, how to apply different formula for computation of material variances. So it's time for us to calculate the labor variances. So let's start with the labor variance. What the labor variance is. Basically, if I have to define it, the labor variance is actually the difference between the standard direct labor cost specified for the activity and the actual direct labor cost incurred. So in this particular point of discussion, there are two components which come to us. One is the standard labor cost for my actual output. So for a given level of actual output, we need to first compute what? The standard labor cost. That as per standard, for a given level of output, what should be my standard labor cost? Once it is computed, we go for calculating the actual labor cost, that what we have actually incurred. If my actual labor cost is equal to standard labor cost, then obviously I'm actually meeting the standards, I'm working as per the standards, so it means there is no problem. But except this situation where my standard labor cost is exactly equal to actual labor cost, there is some problem. If my actual cost is greater than the standard cost, then obviously it is a point of worry for us, because it is going to increase our cost, it is going to increase our total cost of production, because we understand that labor cost is one of the important component of our total cost. Second is, what if my actual labor cost is less than the standard cost? Then there are chances that the standard which we are following is redundant, is obsolete, so that also need to be revised. So that will actually be a point which we'll discuss little later when I'll be taking up the numerical. But as of now, we should understand what is labor cost variance. Labor cost variance is actually the difference between the standard labor cost for a given level of output and the actual labor cost. So the difference between the standard labor cost and actual labor cost is known as labor variance. After this basic understanding, we need to discuss how to calculate labor cost variance. It is very simple to calculate. If I have to calculate labor cost variance, the formula goes like standard cost minus actual cost. And here, since we are computing the labor cost variance, so if I am talking about standard cost, it means I am talking about the standard labor cost. And actual cost means the actual labor cost, because our point of focus must be the labor cost variance only, because we are computing labor cost variance, so our point of focus should be the labor cost only. So with this understanding, what we have to do, just like material cost variances, we have to calculate the standard labor cost for the actual output, and then we have to compare that standard labor cost with that of my actual cost, so that I can find out the variances. Once it is computed, we can declare it either to be favorable or adverse or neutral as per the circumstances or as per the value. So with this understanding what is the labor cost variance, we should go ahead with the justification of it. What can be the possible reasons for labor cost variance? Just like material cost variance, where we were declaring, where we were finding two possible reasons for material cost variance. One was the price variance and the second was the usage variance. Here also we are finding the two possible reasons. But unlike the material cost variance, where we were declaring, where we were calling first component to be the material price variance, here we don't call it the labor price variance, we call it labor rate variance. So the price actually becomes rate here in case of labor variance. So it is quite simple for us to recall. If I have understood the material cost variance, I can very easily replicate the same into the computation of labor cost variance. I have to simply go for taking the rate of labor in place of price of material. Because in case of material, price is given, whereas in case of labor, since we are working on, labor is working on per hour basis, so obviously there is some rate for that particular payment. For each labor hour we are making certain payment, so that is actually the rate variance. So the first component, the first reason is the labor rate variance, and the second can be there in case of material it was usage variance. Here it is actually efficiency variance. That what is the efficiency of my workforce or my labor which is working into the factory. If my labor is efficient, then obviously my efficiency is going to be on the positive side. But on the contrary, if my labor is not efficient, if it is not skilled, then obviously it is going to have some negative impact. So with this understanding, my dear students, we'll be going for understanding the different sets of formula for computing the labor cost variance, the labor rate variance, and the labor efficiency variance. Since we have understood what is the formula for labor cost variance, it is standard cost minus actual cost, which is standard labor cost minus actual labor cost. The second step is how to calculate the standard labor cost and how to calculate the actual labor cost. It is quite simple for us to calculate. Remember, standard labor cost is always calculated for the actual output. So if I have to compute the standard cost, standard labor cost, the formula goes like standard hours into standard rate per hour. So since the standard hours are given, either it will be given or we'll have to calculate. So we'll have to first take up the standard hour and we have to multiply it with the standard rate per hour to calculate the standard cost. For actual cost, again the formula is the way is the same. We will have to take actual hours and multiply it with the actual rate per hour to arrive at actual cost. And the difference between these two is going to be my labor cost variance. So in nutshell, if I have to summarize this formula, I would say that labor cost variance is equal to standard hour into standard rate minus actual hour into actual rate. So with this understanding of labor cost variance formula, now it's time for us to go ahead with justifying this formula of labor cost variance, that what can be the possible reason for this labor cost variance, the reasons which can be attributed to this particular variance of labor cost variance. So my dear student, let's go ahead with the justification that labor cost variance is equal to labor rate variance plus labor efficiency variance. So in case my question is asking me to calculate all labor cost variances, then it is quite obvious that I have to not only calculate the labor cost variance but also the rate variance and the efficiency variance. Cause labor cost variance is actually the function of labor rate variance and labor efficiency variance. So now let's move ahead for computing the labor rate variance. What is a labor rate variance? As the term itself indicates, that labor rate variance talks about the difference in the cost due to the difference in the rate of the labor. So whatever amount I am paying to my worker, my laborer, so that there can be a variation into the rate as far as the payment of labor cost is concerned. If the rate differs, that can also be a reason for the difference or the variance. There might be a possibility that there is a variance or variation into the standard rate of labor and that of the actual rate of labor which we are incurring. So with this understanding of the possible reason of difference in rates, let's look at the formula of labor rate variance. What is the formula? The formula is labor rate variance is equal to standard rate minus actual rate into actual hours. My dear students, if you recall the formula of material price variance, there the formula was like standard price minus actual price, And here in place of your price, what we are getting the rate. So standard rate minus actual rate into actual hours. We are here multiplying it with the actual hours, whereas in case of material price variance, we were actually using the actual quantity. Here we need not to take the quantity, we have to take the actual hours, cause for me now in terms of labor we are making use the workforce in terms of hours only. So that is why the formula goes like labor rate variance is equal to standard rate minus actual rate into actual hours, where SR stands for standard rate per hour and AR stands for actual rate per hour. So this is the formula for labor rate variance. So to justify my labor cost variance, I need to calculate, I'm just repeating it again, we have to calculate the labor rate variance and the labor efficiency variance, and this is the way we have to calculate the labor rate variance. The formula is standard rate minus actual rate into actual hours. So this is the formula for labor rate variance. Now the question comes, what can be the possible reasons for labor rate variance? Or at times my students are asking me, sir, what are the possible reasons for the rate variance? But once we are already having our standard rate and the actual rate is known to us, what can be the possible reasons for this difference? And if that difference is there, then why don't we change our standard? So my dear students, there might be a possibility that while setting the standard, the rate was something different, whereas at the time of actual output or at the time of executing, deploying your workforce, the rate might change, or it may change. So due to that change of this particular rate in labor hours, there can be a labor rate variance. Apart from this, there can be n number of reasons depending on the type of industry you are into, the circumstances, the different factors which are going to affect your rate. But still, to have an understanding of the possible reasons of this labor rate variance, some of the reasons I am discussing here. The first very reason for this labor rate variance can be the change in the basic wage rates. There might be a possibility that into your country, in a given setup where we are working, there are different rates for skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled laborers decided by the Ministry of Labor. So Ministry of Labor, you can say, they are deciding the different rates for skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled laborers, and as per that rate you have to pay. You can't pay them less than that labor cost, or you can say less than that amount to your workforce. So depending on that particular change, you'll have to change your payment also. So there might be a possibility while setting the standard rate was something else, whereas at the time of making actual payment, the standard are revised. So since you have to comply with the standards, since we have to comply with the legal obligations or the mandate given by the government, or at times we are also going for revising the wage rates to our workers, for our workforce. So that can also be a possible reason. Although normally when you are revising the rates on your own, the HR department is informing this to the costing department that you need to revise your standards. So there are very less chances that this can be a reason, but as far as the government rules are concerned, that can be a possible reason for this labor rate variance, that there is a difference there is a change in the basic wage rate. The standard rate is something else, whereas the actual rate is now it has changed. It can go either side. Change means either it may increase or it may decrease, although there are greater chances that the rate of labor increases. Very less chances you'll find that the rate of labor is declining or decreasing, right? So this can be the first reason. Moving on to the second reason, use of a different method of wage payment. There might be a possibility that the method of wage payment which you are using, you have changed. There might be a possibility that while setting the standard, there was a different method of computing wage payment, whereas while making actual payment to your workforce, you change the method of computing the labor cost. So that can also be a reason for difference into your labor rate. So this is the second possible reason for labor rate variance. The next can be new workers not being paid at full rates. There might be a possibility that you have some senior workers, you have recently deployed some new workers, and you are not making payment to them as per as per the higher rates or the rates which your present workers are charging, or you can say at the rate at which your present workers are being paid, you are not following that because new workers are there. You are assigning a reason that since you are not trained, so we'll be paying you at a lesser rate as compared to the existing workforce. So that can also be a possible reason for labor rate variance. Another reason can be employing workers of grades different from the standard grades specified. There might be a possibility that your standard is, while setting the standard, you are following specific grades. You are specifying specific grades for making payment to your workforce, whereas while going for actual payment, you have not followed that particular standard or specified standard. So that can also be a possible reason for this labor rate variance. So my dear students, these differences are only indicative. The reasons can be something else also, but the crux of the story is that the labor rate variance is there due to change in the standard rate of labor and the actual rate of labor cost. So whatever standard says, if the standard rate is suppose 10 rupees and actual rate is 9 rupees or 11 rupees, there are chances of having variances. So the difference between these two rates are resulting into the labor rate variance. So this variance is since it is originating due to change in the labor rate, that is why we are calling it labor rate variance, right? I hope you must have understood what is labor rate variance. The variance in labor cost which is coming due to change in the payment of labor hours rate, or you can say the rate of labor hours, or you can say working hours. This can be a reason for labor rate variance. So after understanding the labor rate variance, let's talk about the next possible reason for labor cost variance, that is labor efficiency variance. The term itself is indicating that it is coming to us due to the change in the efficiency, the standard efficiency and the actual efficiency. There might be a possibility that while setting the standard, we are having some standards that if my worker is properly trained, skilled, and within a given setup, if the labor is working, then obviously this should be the output. So as per the standard hours, in one standard hour of workforce or labor, they need to produce a specific unit of output. That is called their efficiency, that whether they are able to produce as per the standards or not. If they are not able to produce as per the standard, then obviously there are chances of having labor efficiency variance. So let's have a look at the formula. How to calculate labor efficiency variance? The formula is standard hour minus actual hour into standard rate. So we have to understand that why are we taking labor hours here? Because in a given labor hour, they are supposed to produce certain units of output. Just like in case of material, we were quantifying the material in terms of quantity, say units, that is kilograms, or you can say it can be any unit for material. Just like material, for labors we are having only one unit, that is labor hours. So with a given standard hour of labor, what is my output? That is my standard output. Suppose if I am saying that in order to produce 10 units of the output or finished goods, labor is going to take 1 hour. So in 1 hour they are supposed to produce 10 units of my output. That is actually their standard hour. So for 1 unit, what is the standard hour? That is known to us. So standard hour minus actual hour into standard rate. If there is some variance into the standard hour and actual hour, suppose if worker is supposed to take 10 hours to produce 1 unit, and if my worker is taking more than that, that is 12 hours or 15 hours, there are chances of we having labor efficiency variance, and for this only we are applying this formula. So formula is standard hour minus actual hour into standard rate. So just like material usage variance, there we were taking quantity. Here also we are taking the quantity of labor, but that quantity changes. Here the quantity is not in terms of units, it is in terms of hours. So standard hour minus actual hour into standard rate. We multiply it with the standard rate, and according to the situation we'll be assigning it a tag of either favorable, adverse or neutral. Once we have understood about the labor cost variance, usage variance, and labor cost variance, rate variance, and efficiency variance, we have to further discuss what can be the possible reason for labor efficiency variance. It can be obviously poor working conditions, that my worker is not working in congenial or is not finding congenial working environment. Due to that, there are chances of having labor efficiency variance. Labor is complaining that we are not provided with the proper atmosphere, proper environment, we are not provided with the basic resources so that so as to enable us to produce the standard output. That is why we are not working as per efficiency, we are not efficient enough to work here because the working environment or condition is not good. There are chances of labor efficiency variance due to unskilled workers. When you are talking to your team leader, the workforce which you have applied there, if you are talking to their team leader that why you are not able to produce as per the standard, then at times they are reporting that this is a possible reason. There are chances of having idle time due to time wastage or idle time. There are chances of having labor efficiency variance, that your labor is having lot of idle time, either due to their own mistakes, either they are wasting their time, or at times due to shortage of supply of raw material, there is some time waste by the workers, and that also lead to labor efficiency variance. There can be a reason of labor mix variance. You are not applying the skilled, semi-skilled and unskilled labors, you are not deploying them in a right proportion, and obviously all these things are leading to the labor yield variance. So with this understanding of labor cost variance, rate variance and usage and efficiency variance, let's calculate, let's apply this formula into a numerical problem. So let's have a look at the problem. Following information is provided by a company called Shreya Limited. Standard hour per unit is 15. Standard rate is rupees 4 per hour. The actual information for actual production is given here. The production is 1000 units. The actual hours which you have deployed for producing these 1000 units is 15,300. Actual rate is 3.90 per hour, and you are supposed to calculate labor variance and comment. So the question is giving you the standard as well as actual, and they're asking you to calculate labor variances and comment. So when they are saying you have to calculate labor variances, obviously you have to calculate not only labor cost variance but also the rate variance and efficiency variance. So let's calculate labor cost variance. Formula is known to us, standard cost minus actual cost. We'll have to first calculate standard cost for actual production. Standard hours into standard rate will be the formula. Standard hour we know, 15 hours you are supposed to take for producing 1 unit, and since you are producing 1000 units, you will take how many hours as per standard? 15,000 hours. So this is my standard hour, 15 hours into 1000 units, 15,000 hours. What is my standard rate? Rupees 4 per hour. It is given in the question. Once we multiply this standard hours with the standard rate, we get the standard cost, and that becomes rupees 60,000. Once it is calculated, the next step is to calculate actual cost. For actual cost, we have to find out the actual hours. Actual production is 1000 units. Actual hours reported in the question is 15,300 hours. Actual rate given is 3.90 per hour. So very simple, we have to simply of labor with the actual rate, that is 15,300 into 3.90, and we get a value of 59,670. So this is my actual cost. Once the standard cost and actual cost is calculated, we can very easily calculate labor cost variance. The formula is standard cost minus actual cost. Standard cost is 60,000, actual cost is 59,670. So actual cost is less than standard cost. That is why we would say that the situation is favorable for us. We would say 330 rupees favorable. Now this 330 rupees favorable need to be justified with the computation of labor rate variance. Formula is known to us, standard rate minus actual rate into actual hours. Standard rate was rupees 4 per hour. Actual rate is 3.90, which is less than the standard rate, and actual hours is 15,300. Since you have saved 10 paisa per hour in terms of labor payment as far as the standard as compared to your standard, so 10 paisa per hour you are saving. So in totality, in total you are saving rupees 1530, rupees 1530, which means labor rate variance is in your favor. It is going to be favorable. Next is labor efficiency variance. I told you the formula, standard hour minus actual hours into standard rate. Standard hour is 15,000, actual hour is 15,300, which means actual hour is greater than the standard hour. It means it is going to be adverse for us. So total 300 hours extra you are deploying. Standard rate is rupees 4. Once we multiply, we get 1200 adverse. So efficiency variance is adverse for us because we are consuming large number of hours as compared to the standard hours. Now we have to justify the labor cost variance is equal to labor rate variance plus efficiency variance. Labor cost variance, my dear students, it was 330 rupees favorable, whereas the rate variance is 1530 favorable and efficiency variance is 1200 adverse. Once we aggregate these two, that is labor rate variance and efficiency variance, what we get? 330 favorable, and that is exactly equal to the labor cost variance. So in this way, my dear students, we have justified the computation of labor cost variance and by computing the labor rate variance and labor efficiency variance. So we have understood that labor cost variance is actually the sum total of labor rate variance and labor efficiency variance. I hope you must have understood how to calculate labor cost variance. Then we have to justify by computing the labor rate variance and the labor efficiency variance. I hope you must have understood and enjoyed today's lecture of mine. Thank you so much.